Even in those hours when the gray Petersburg sky fades completely and all clerical folk have eaten their fill and finished dinner, each as he could, according to his salary and his personal fancy. When all have rested after the departmental scratching of pens, the rushing about seeing to their own and other people's needful occupations, and all that irrepressible man heaps voluntarily on himself even more than is necessary. When clerks hasten to give the remaining time to pleasure, the more ambitious rushing to the theater, another going out to devote it to gazing at silly hats, another to a party, to spend it paying compliments to some pretty girl, the star of a small clerical circle. Still another, and this happens most often, simply going to his own kind to some fourth or third floor, two small rooms with a front hall and a kitchen, with some claim to fashion, a lamp or other object that costs great sacrifices, the giving up of dinners, outings, in short, even at that time when all clerks disperse to their friends' small apartments to play cutthroat whist, sipping tea from glasses, with 1 kopeck rusks, puffing smoke through long chibuks, repeating while the cards are being dealt some gossip blown over from high society, something a Russian man can never give up under any circumstances, or even, when there's nothing to talk about, retelling the eternal joke about the commandant who was brought word that the horse of Falconet's monument had had its tail docked. In short, even when everything strives for diversion, Akaky Akakiyevich did not give himself up to any diversion. No one could say he had ever been seen at any party. When he had written his fill, he would go to bed, smiling beforehand at the thought of the next day. What would God send him to copy tomorrow? So flowed the peaceful life of this man who, with a salary of 400, was able to content himself with his lot. And so it might have flowed on into extreme old age, had it not been for the various calamities strewn along the path of life, not only of titular, but even of privy, actual, court, and other counselors, even of those who neither give counsel nor take any themselves. There exists in Petersburg a powerful enemy of all who earn a salary of 400 rubles or thereabouts. This enemy is none other than our northern frost, though, incidentally, people say it is very healthful. Toward 9 o'clock in the morning, precisely the hour when the streets are covered with people going to their offices, it starts dealing such strong and sharp flicks to all noses indiscriminately that the poor clerks decidedly do not know where to put them. At that time, when even those who occupy high positions have an ache in their foreheads from the cold and tears come to their eyes, poor titular counselors are sometimes defenseless. The whole of salvation consists in running as quickly as possible in your skimpy overcoat across 5 or 6 streets and then standing in the porter's lodge, stamping your feet good and hard, thereby thawing out all your job performing gifts and abilities, which had become frozen on the way. Akaky Akakiyevich had for a certain time begun to feel that he was somehow getting it, especially in the back and shoulder, though he tried to run across his allotted space as quickly as possible. He thought finally that the sin might perhaps lie with his overcoat. Examining it well at home, he discovered that in 2 or 3 places, namely on the back and shoulders, it had become just like burlap. The broadcloth was so worn out that it was threadbare, and the lining had fallen to pieces. It should be known that Akaky Akakiyevich's overcoat also served as an object of mockery for the clerks. They even deprived it of the noble name of overcoat and called it a housecoat. Indeed, it was somehow strangely constituted. Its collar diminished more and more each year, for it went to mend other parts. The mending did not testify to any skill in the tailor, and the results were in fact crude and unsightly. Seeing what situation was, Akaky Akakiyevich decided that the overcoat had to be taken to Petrovich, the tailor, who lived somewhere on a 4th floor up a back entrance, and who, in spite of his blind eye and the pockmarks all over his face, performed the mending of clerkly and all other trousers and tailcoats quite successfully. To be sure, when he was sober and not entertaining any other projects in his head. Of this tailor, of course, not much should be said, but since there exists a rule that the character of every person in a story be well delineated, there's no help for it. Let us have Petrovich here as well. In the beginning, he was simply called Grigory and was some squire's serf. He began to be called Petrovich when he was freed and started drinking rather heavily on feast days. First on great feasts, and then on all church feasts indiscriminately, wherever a little cross appeared on the calendar. In this respect, he was true to the customs of his forebears, and, in arguing with his wife, used to call her a worldly woman and a German. Now that we've mentioned the wife, we ought to say a couple of words about her as well, but unfortunately not much is known about her, except that Petrovich had a wife, and that she even wore a bonnet, not a kerchief. But it seems she could not boast of her beauty, at least when meeting her. Only guardsmen looked under her bonnet, winking their mustaches and emitting some special noise.